Alright, so begins project header swap. So obviously nothing's been done here yet. Here is my header from American Customs. It's their PowerFlex header, which is essentially just a stock header with the cat removed. You can kind of see where they've done work here. Pull the cat out. If you look down in here, I don't know if you can really see it. Let me get some light. You can kind of see there's like a little diverter in there, which is supposed to, looks like it goes down that way, divert, flow evenly to the left and right exhaust. Take a look at it from this side. And you can kind of see in there. So anyway, and it looks like this particular heat shield is part of the header assembly. So this piece here will come off with it. Seems to be in similar condition to my new header. Again, my bike has about 2,000 miles on it. Had it for about 2.5 months. And so let's get started on this. So to get the header off, again, not again, but you should definitely get a manual, a real manual, not the owner's manual, but a service manual for your motorcycle. And because it tells you all the stuff you've got to do. So when I look at head pipe removal, you'll see step 1 is remove the crossover pipe 3.89. So I'm going to be starting here. I've already got the saddlebags removed, and I'm going to take off the heat shields. And it doesn't look like in these instructions that the exhausts themselves have to come off, but my sub project to this is going to be to punch out the plugs, so that'll be part of this as well. So I'm going to get started, and I'm going to be pulling the heat shields off. Alright, so left side heat shield, looks like it's pretty simple. Got a clamp here and a clamp here holding that heat shield on. It says to use a flathead screwdriver, but I'm going to find a socket that fits that. Alright, left heat shield off. Pretty simple. It says flathead screwdriver, but a 1/4 inch socket with a screwdriver works just even better. I've noticed on these bikes there's a lot of metric and standard mixed. You know, obviously these clamps are these are standard. A lot of other things like the seat bolts are metric. So experiment, find what works. So heat shield off, sitting right here. I'll probably leave this clamp on here since it'll slide off once I get the header off. This one, of course, is part of the heat shield, kind of looped right in there, so it does have to be opened all the way up. Onto the right side. Okay, the right side heat shield, which essentially just runs from the rear muffler up to here. Looks like there is another clamp there, and one near the back right here. I think it's just those two, so it should be fairly straightforward. Looks like it's also a 1/4 inch with a flathead slot. So take that off. All right heat shield's off. So here we can see the stock header. It was just those two clamps, so it was very easy to get off. And let's see what's next. Alrighty, so going by the manual on crossover pipe removal, before we can remove the header, looks like actually the crossover is really part of the header. Oh no, it isn't. Scratch that. So our next step is remove left and right muffler assemblies, page 3.88. Again, this is why it's great to have a manual. So then here it talks about loosening but not removing the heat shield clamps. Well, that's assuming we just want to remove the mufflers. We've already removed the heat shields, so we can skip that. And so it looks like the next step is to loosen the muffler clamps between the head pipe and the crossover pipe. I've found those. And removing the 4 fasteners, secure the mufflers, and then basically slide the mufflers rearward to pull them off. So, being that my bike is new and only has a couple grand on it in miles, hopefully these won't be too difficult. So let's go take a look. Okay, so we've got these 2 clamps on either side with a bolt fastening it that clamps the muffler to the header pipe. 1 on each side, they're identical. And back here, there are 2 bolts on each side, so 4 total. See if I can get up under here. Can't see them from that side. Let me show the left side, they're a little bit easier to see. So on the left side here you can see these 4 bolts. 1, 2. Now on the other side there are also 2. So it's just a matter of loosening these clamps and pulling those bolts out and sliding the mufflers off, or so it says. In order to get these bolts out from behind here, got to remove the antenna because it's got a bolt sticking right out there. So it is a 8mm bolt for that. And just as an FYI, obviously every bike might be a little different. Hopefully not. It's a 15mm for the coupler to the header to the pipes to the exhaust, and it is a 13mm for the mounting bolts on the rear. So I'm going to get my antenna off there, antenna mount. The antenna is already off. A while back I had replaced my long ass antenna with the shorty antenna. It's actually a Victory part number, but it fits on here just great. Alright, I got those rear bolts out. A little side note here, this is the clamp for the antenna mount. That obviously just pops right out. But I've got those 2 bolts out, and right now it's just being suspended by the header itself. Nothing holding it on but that. So I'm going to spray some little WD-40 on there, see if I can work this thing loose. Alright, actually came up pretty easy. Obviously on older bikes it's going to be a little rough. Sprayed it on there. And I had read this before, just taking this, wiggling it up and down, left and right. Can I get that loose there? And I believe now that it's loose, and yep, I needed 2 hands to do that, so I didn't do something stupid, but that wiggled right off. That there is the just a little cap that sits on top of there. Apparently it just sits in there. That wasn't hard at all. Looking down in here, I think, not sure if those are the plugs that I punch out. I'll have to look a little bit online and see what I find out on that. Alrighty, so left muffler removed, right muffler removed. That step is complete in that section. So now we're jumping back over here to crossover pipe removal. Already did that, So remove the support fastener 2 from the left side of the motorcycle. Looks easy enough. Here's where I think I'm going to depart a little bit from this manual. It wants me to disconnect the rear O2 sensor from the header pipe, but I don't really see how that, relates to the crossover pipe. I mean, when I pull the header off, of course I have to disconnect that, but if you look down here, you can see this crossover pipe is connected through this bolt right there. Of course that will drop down this whole section. And on the right hand side, it looks like it's just another clamp like we had for the mufflers, and that should just pop right off. Maybe because that's going to loosen the header, I don't know. Obviously the O2 sensor is right there, so that's pretty simple to get to. Well, you know what? I'm going to do what the directions say, and I'm going to remove it because maybe it's there in the directions for a reason. I'm good at following directions. One thing the military taught me is how to read a manual and follow steps. So I'm going to get busy removing that crossover pipe in the O2 sensor. Just a little side note on removing this O2 sensor. As you do turn this, it twists the lines. So I went back here, and that O2 sensor line is just tucked into a little clamp here, like that. Really simple. Push it back, pull that out, give yourself a little bit of slack so you're not twisting that short segment of wire. We don't want to cause any problems with that O2 sensor and have to replace that thing. Looks like it's a pretty short run to its connector. You know what? I think I'm going to see if I can disconnect that up there. That was a pretty easy disconnect. Single-handed disconnect of that O2 sensor. Luckily, my hands were just able to get in there. And obviously you can see it gives us a lot more slack in there. And I was a little worried about twisting that wire up, so I think it'll be much easier. I should be able to just twist that out right out of there now. All right, so the O2 sensor is removed. I loosened the clamp on the right side, and that's the only thing holding this on. It looks like I can basically kind of rotate this and wiggle it back. You know, this goes up in here to mount. It's already loose now. I'm rotating it back so you can see that coming off. Boom, came off pretty easy. Of course, I soaked it in WD-40. So, crossover pipe off. I think what the directions wanted me to do was to also loosen up the exhaust clamp going into the header from the crossover, actually not here, right here, and loosen the bolts, support fasteners 5. And I think that's why it wanted me to have the O2 sensor, which is now just sitting here. I should actually put that over here with my stuff as organized. And anyway, so I don't think it was necessary to take the O2 sensor off on that step, but it has to come off anyway, so it's off. And I think I'm only a clamp and a couple bolts away from pulling that header off. We'll see what's next. All right, I see now what I was misunderstanding in the directions. Head pipe removal is referring strictly, I think, to the front head pipe. You'll notice this other section here. Actually, what it says here is remove the crossover pipe and rear head pipe assembly. And of course, the rear head pipe is really all that I'm taking off here. That's where the cat is. No sense in replacing the front head pipe. So this whole section I can ignore. This is titled crossover pipe removal, but really it's the crossover and rear head pipe. So that's why it wanted me to take that O2 sensor off. It's all in the same step. So looks like it's just a matter of unbolting it, and I'm not sure, 7 heat sink trim cover, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell that is. I don't see that. It looks like it's button. I don't know what the hell that is. Maybe it's behind this panel or under there somewhere. I don't know. But I do know that to remove the header pipe, I've got this bolt down here that, if you see, is a little bit blocked by that panel. And of course, the panel, to get that panel off, it's around the rear floorboard mount. So think I'm going to have to pull the rear floorboard off also. It certainly can't hurt to get that out of the way. I don't want to scratch it. I don't want to scratch that painted panel, so I'm going to pull all of that off. That was much simpler than I thought it was going to be. Just those 2 bolts, and then this whole piece comes out. Those 2 bolts, which is a number 5 on the hex. And now I have those bolts exposed that I need to access. So that was a little bit easier than I thought it was going to be. Alright, so actually I think I'm good. I can get a wrench in here, and I was worried about getting a torque wrench in there when I'm done, but I think I can just snug it down real good. What was a little bit disconcerting was that bolt was not very tight. It definitely was not torqued to spec. So, but I can get it off of there without pulling stuff off. I just want to be careful not to scratch anything. So, moving forward, I think I'm going to be able to get the rest of this out of here without a trip to the hardware store. Alrighty, so we've got bolt removed, clamp loosened, bolts removed out of there. One note, it's a 13 millimeter nut that goes on there, and on the top of the rear header pipe. And when I first started taking it off, I thought I had the wrong size. I thought maybe, oh, well, maybe it's a 12 because it spun so freely. No, the bolt was just that loose, which is a little bit odd. Might explain some of the extra heat that I had. Maybe it's been leaking. If it wasn't tight, I don't know. So, but this header should now, the rear header should come off of here. There's nothing left holding it on, so I'm going to try to wiggle it loose. Okay, not without significant effort. The header pipe is off. So, what I discovered is when you're trying to work this out, it's good to have a little bit of play in here without it hitting this floorboard. So, I pulled that rear floorboard bolt out, loosened the top one so I could just rotate it down a little bit out of the way. Give me a little bit of play there. And it seems like the best way to do this is to get this part free and loose first before you take these bolts off of here, but leave them on versus trying to slide that out. My thought was I could just sort of, let me get back up over here, twist this part out and make it easier to get this part off by just kind of rotating the whole thing out that way. But this hits up under here and it kind of jams it up in there. So I think the best way to go about this is to leave the take those bolts off, or those nuts off, but leave them on there. Work it free from the bottom first, and then the whole thing just kind of pops right off. Don't try to get the top part off and rotate it out. It simply will not work. But live and learn. Got it off of there. You can see I didn't have to pull the rear floorboard or anything off there. Loosened that front floorboard. When I did pull the header out, it did have this, looks sort of like a gasket. It is flexible. I don't know if it's made out of some kind of insulator, but it appears to be in good shape. I'm not gonna do anything with it, so I put it back in, and I think we're good to go. Everything looks good up in here. Bolts are fine. It'll be interesting to take my idea and reverse it. Put that top piece kind of on there a little bit first, and then work on the bottom. Kind of work it in there. Also, I did take and lay a cloth across here so that as I was trying to work the pipe out, I didn't get any scarring or anything on the cover there. So good to go. Breakdown segment complete, and ready to put the new header on. All right, a word of note on the header and crossover pipe installation. Just like in the removal process, it wants to have the crossover pipe connected to the rear header pipe before I install it. It was kind of the same way on removal. It seemed to think that would be easier to have that still connected but loose. I'm going to try to put it on the way I took it off, which was without the crossover pipe. I'm not going to worry about that crossover pipe until I get the header at least on loosely, then I'll see about the crossover pipe. All right, hindsight note number 327. The difficulty that I had getting that rear header off, I think, could have been alleviated by doing what I am hoping will help get the new header on. When you look at the manual, it basically assumes you're removing the front and rear header pipe, and when you're putting it back on or taking it off, you're dealing with this front header pipe, and when you're putting it back on, you're not tightening everything down until everything's in place. So also part of it is removing the floorboard. So I went ahead and pulled the driver floorboard completely off. You can see I just stuck it on a box here with a rag so it doesn't scratch, so it's all nice and stays nice and level with that master cylinder. And I took off the front heat shield thingy, whatever the hell that's called, heat dissipation unit, and I loosened the bolts for the front header. Again, just like the rears, they weren't super tight. I'm going to look at the torque specs on that when I put it back on, make sure they're torqued properly. But it's kind of weird the way they go in. The flange piece here I don't think gets all the way flush, because this goes inside to the head and that goes up flush, and then this, of course, there's a little bit of gap there, but that's fine because it's tied up on this end. But the bolts, I'm sure, should still be torqued to some spec. They weren't super tight at all. So anyway, now you can see I've got quite a bit of play here in this. And I'm hoping that I can get the rear header on much easier now with that much play. All right, so I forget what I've recorded over. So, but I discovered that after taking that floorboard off and give myself a lot of wiggle room, that rear header went on quite easily. So what I did was I got that on, just kind of sat it in place. I finger tightened the bolts in here. Those are still finger tied up here, so everything's loose. Clamp still not tightened, and it slid right into place, right in where it goes over those threads there for that bolt. And I then took the crossover pipe, and just like when I took it off, you can take it and sort of rotate it down that way, so it rotates this down is how I got it off. Did the same method to get it back on. I put it in over there, wiggle, 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 got it up, finger tightened that bolt. Then when I got over here to the right side though, I found that this that bolt wasn't lined up. So pretty simple, little piece of wood, a little bit of hammer, tap that thing down after I lubed it up. Now we're nice and lined up. Everything is back in place. I can put this bolt back in. Can't do it with one hand apparently, especially not my left hand. And once I get that bolt in, it's a matter of torquing everything to spec, and that part's done. And then I'll work on punching out the plugs on the pipes, on the mufflers. of course, put the heat shields and stuff back on, everything in reverse. Looks like I never really had to take the seat off, but oh well. It'll give me a chance to clean that fender off and polish everything up and make it nice and pretty. So, I think everything else from here on out is pretty straightforward. I'm still going to video, but I think all of the hard part is over, and it's working out quite well so far. All right, everything is fairly well reconnected and torqued. I've got the front and rear headers both all bolted and torqued. Turns out those were only 15 foot-pounds, so makes sense why they weren't feeling that tight. They came off pretty easy at 15 foot-pounds. So that's, I guess that's normal. Floorboard reconnected. I believe the torque for those is 35 foot-pounds. The exhaust clamps, where's the back one? Exhaust clamps all reconnected, torqued to 31 inch-pounds. I'm sorry, foot-pounds. And I'm just reconnecting the O2 sensor here, and I was just going to kind of show how, as I spin this with my hand to tighten it, you can see my cable head down there turning with it, which is why I disconnected the whole thing to begin with, so it doesn't twist all up. So getting that reconnected, and I also got the mounting bolt for the crossover pipe torqued down. I think the crossover pipe was only 18 foot-pounds. Here you can see all the torque values. The heatsink cover fasteners for the little heatsink is only 84 inch-pounds. And so here's where you see the head pipe flange nuts are only 15 foot-pounds. That's why those were kind of loose. Floorboards, 35 foot-pounds. More flange nuts. The heat shield clamps are 31 inch-pounds. I haven't gotten to those yet. Exhaust clamps, really they want 31 inch-pounds. So everything's coming back together nicely. I'm going to get that O2 sensor reconnected, get that heat shield reconnected, and basically the front part of this job will be done. Alrighty, I was able to punch the plug out. Started out flat, beat the hell out of it in the middle, and I realized I've moved to the edges. So you can see now I've got clear passage all the way through. Basically all I did was take the flat end on a piece of wood, and I think the method that worked out best for me was to take, people talk about rebar or whatever. I went to Home Depot and got this $7 pipe or rod, whatever. And I think the way that worked for me was to angle it so that I would lean the pipe to the right, work on the left side, and to the left, work on that side. And just kind of went around in a circle hammering with a 3-pound mallet, not that little one, but that one. And just kept banging on it, and it eventually popped out. Then I had to shake it around to get it to line up with the hole and poke it the rest of the way through so it would fall out and not just rattle around in there. So gonna do the other pipe now, or other muffler, and get them mounted up. Alrighty, mufflers are back on. I don't have the I think anything torqued down yet. Those are still loose. The clamps are loose, and those are loose. The reason I didn't tighten them down, even though the manual says to go ahead and torque those to spec, then torque those, and then put the heat shields back on. I am going to line up the heat shields to make sure they line up right with the edge here, because these do have a bit of play forward and back, probably about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch to and forward. I mean, these ideally should, I guess, be lining up, which they do. And I'm going to go ahead and just put the heat shields on and take them back off. Not on all the way, you know, just kind of hold them up. So make sure things line up. Then I'm going to torque those down and I'm going to see what it sounds like. I was a little bit off. Not really. I mean, I put a little bit off my order. The directions do say to go ahead and put the, where is it? Install left and right heat shields. Get the light there. Install left and right heat shields and torque front clamps to specs. So that is the step before putting on the mufflers. So, you know, I was right in leaving those loose. And you'll see here, let me get some light. You can see where the, trying to get that, not get the thing there. You can see where the heat shield lined up before. So slide the pipe in just to cover that point where it was before. And you can see back here, it's still pretty well lined up. But that's why it has the play in there to make sure we can get that lined up. The front part of the heat shield is on. It's all mucked up. I gotta polish it, but all lines up good. So I'm gonna do the same over here and tighten just the front clamp, line up the mufflers, and then tighten everything down. I almost forgot. I did a quick little run test a second ago, but Jamie at Fuel Moto sent me a proper tune for this particular configuration. So I flash my ECU with the tune he gave me, then I shall go for a ride. All right, it's a couple days later here. I did do a test ride yesterday, but it was kind of cold, so I didn't go for very long. So I'm going to do a little ride today. I didn't get a good sound check after my tune, so this is a cold start check. And by the way, you can see my tank scripts on there. So let's see here. I'll do another test when I get back to show the sound warmed up. Go for a ride. All right, rode around a little bit. Here's a warm start sound check outside the garage.